Hello, and welcome to the view from IMF and World Bank meetings. I'm Joy Macknight, Managing Editor at The Banker, and I'm joined by Victoria Cleland, Executive Director for Banking, Payments and Innovation at Bank of England, to talk about how central banks can foster innovation and digital transformation. Victoria, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hello.
So can you tell me a little bit about how the Bank of England is really modernising its infrastructure?
I'm really lucky to be working in the bank at a time where payments infrastructure is very near the top of the list. We're renewing our real-time gross settlement infrastructure. The current system is well over 20 years old, but it is absolutely crucial to financial stability. We see about £650 billion a day going through the system. So we're going through a major programme to renew the system. We've been talking very closely to industry to understand what they want. Ultimately, the system is for them. And we're a central bank, so at the heart of what we're doing is resilience. So we're trying to strengthen resilience, both operationally against cyber threats and things. But we also see the change as a great opportunity to introduce more innovation. A key part of that innovation is actually increasing access to more players. So traditionally it was the main sort of banks were members of RTGS. Now we've opened up to non-bank payment service providers. That was a policy change and we've already seen some of them joining. But in the new system, we're going to make it even easier for them to join. The process, the technology, the testing will be easier. We're also looking at interoperability between different payment systems. So we're working very closely with Pay.UK, who lead all the retail systems here, to say, can we together use ISO 20022 messaging, and can we have a common credit message for the UK? And following consultation, we've agreed we had, and that will allow the systems to talk much more closely to each other. And if ever there is a problem where our strong resilience hasn't quite worked, you could potentially reroute systems, for example, from faster payments to CHAP. So that's where we're thinking innovatively and how can technology harmonisation help. And we're also looking at how to improve user functionality, so bringing in read-write APIs, looking at how to enhance the liquidity saving mechanism for the banks, and then looking at the whole payment eco-structure. So rather than just thinking about, oh, well, let's make RTGS better, we're thinking about, and CHAP's the wholesale system, and their participants and their third-party suppliers. So it's quite a big agenda, but really it is combining resilience and innovation to make sure that the payment systems really are fit for purpose.
Okay, because that comes down to the role that the central banks can play in really driving innovations in payments. What advice would you give other central banks that are trying to embark on the same innovation agenda?
So I think a lot of it is really talking to industry. When we started to renew the system, the key thing was to understand from industry what they wanted, where they were going, but also to think a bit ahead. So, for example, at the moment, the system runs 5 days a week, roughly 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening. But we were saying, what about 24/7? And on the whole, the feedback was, no, we don't want 24/7 at the moment. But we're thinking, actually, in an increasingly global market with a lot of focus on cross-border payment, it is likely that in the not too distant future, 24/7 could be helpful. So we're building in that capacity to the system, even though the demand isn't immediately there. And again, just trying to think ahead. For example, we've decided we're not going to build our own RTGS system on distributed ledger technology, but we know that going forward, firms using DLT might want to connect. So we've run a proof of concept to ensure those firms could connect. So I think a lot of it is really trying to understand, what does the market want? Where might things be heading? And how can we, as a central bank, support that? Sometimes sort of opening up the risk debate a bit. So our decision to open up to non-bank payment service providers, we did have to weigh up the risks to that, but then we worked very closely with the Financial Conduct Authority and found a regime where they would be regulated by the FCA that gave us the confidence to let them join the system. So I think it's being a bit braver than central banks really are, but how can we support the industry?
And another hot topic is really around the central bank digital currencies.
Yeah.
What is your view on that?
I think it's a really interesting concept. I mean, with many things as a central bank, we need to be thinking, what is the market failure? What is it that we as a central bank could be solving. At the Bank of England, we did quite a lot of work looking at central bank issued digital currencies a few years ago, really trying to understand partly what would the implications be, for example, monetary policy transmission mechanisms, also what would the impact be on the financial system, because you could envisage a situation if we had a full fat, so to speak, central bank issued digital currency with all the consumers having accounts with us. They might prefer us to commercial banks. Where do the commercial banks then get deposits from to on lend? So thinking through some of those issues, I think there's a lot more to think through on that. I think the real question is who would use it and why would they use it? What needs we want to fulfil? And I think there are areas where people are finding it more difficult to access financial systems. So it's, to my mind, it's what is the use case? I think that's what we really need to show at the moment, but we've seen things such as Libra getting a lot of attention, issues potentially around financial inclusion, potentially around cross-border payments. So I think it's important that central banks look to see what they can do, but again, having that sort of market failure view on it.
Okay. And my last question is around the IMF and World Bank meetings.
Yeah.
What do you think will be the hot topics there?
I'm sure there are going to be a numerous number of hot topics, but I sincerely hope that payments will be there. I started working in payments about 10 years ago in a different role. It was very much the plumbing. Now it really is seen as the future. There's so much that payments can help shape, and of course they're absolutely crucial to financial stability. So my hope is they'll be there near the top of the list.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your insights, Victoria.
Thank you.